America is a maritime nation, and we are returning to our maritime roots. One of the key projects that your generation will have to face is sustaining and enhancing American strength across the great maritime region of the Pacific. America's future prosperity and security are tied to our ability to advance peace and security along the arc, extending from the Western Pacific and East Asia into the Indian Ocean and South Asia. That reality is inescapable for our country and for our military, which has already begun broadening and deepening our engagement throughout the Asia Pacific. One of your great challenges as an officer in the Navy will be to ensure the peace and prosperity of the Asia Pacific region for the 21st century. We need you to project America's power and to reflect America's character, to serve on ships and submarines, to fly planes, and to train and operate throughout that region. We need you to do the important work of strengthening and modernizing our historic alliances with Japan, with Korea, with Australia, with the Philippines, with Thailand.
On Sunday, 2 men became the first Tibetans to self-immolate in Lhasa, the capital of the Tibetan Autonomous Region. The 2 were taken away by authorities within just a few minutes of setting themselves on fire. The self-immolation occurred just outside the popular tourist spot Jokhang Temple in Lhasa. According to Chinese state-run media, one of the men, identified as Tobje Zeten, died. The other, a man identified as Darje, was hospitalized. According to Radio Free Asia, a source has said that the 2 were monks at the temple. The identity of the 2 men cannot be confirmed. The temple has been under heavy security since.
Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. My website is ggnonline.com, and on YouTube is ddarko2012, and my backup channel is ddarko2013. So I have a follow-up story that I found after I saw this news story, which is the 2 Tibetan monks self-immolate, and Lhasa, which was Tibetan mother of 3 self-immolates in China's Sichuan province, said on Wednesday afternoon. This is from 5:30. So on Wednesday afternoon, 33-year-old mother of 3 self-immolated near the monastery. It says here that the head of the Buddhist Association in India told Radio Free Asia that the woman's name was Rikyo. He said her body is being held at the monastery despite Chinese police demanding to take it away. So maybe they're going to put it behind bars and torture the dead body. So, and it says here, earlier this week, 2 men in Lhasa became the first reported self-immolated protesters in Tibetan Autonomous Region. So that's kind of a follow-up. So, and the death of this woman makes it the 38th Tibetan to self-immolate since February of 2009. All the headlines and links will be posted in YouTube's video description. The first video, if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It's the economy, and then I kind of move into some surveillance news. And in this one, we'll cover obviously Asia and kind of basically world political war type stuff. Okay, we have this 45 signs that China is colonizing America, and I've been covering this, but I like how this article kind of wrapped it all together, because when you saw that video of Panetta saying, you know, we're a maritime nation. Well, we're right. He's right. You know, we go by what? Maritime law of the water and all that stuff. And you know, we need to project our power in Asia now. So that's what he's talking to the future generations of military members, that's their new theater is the Pacific, not the Middle East. So likewise, you have the Chinese also colonizing America slowly. So in case you haven't noticed, many of our formerly great manufacturing cities, such as Detroit, are rotting away while shining new factories and skyscrapers are going up all around China. So, and you go down and it says that it was recently announced that China's Wanda Group has bought a U.S. movie theater. Remember I covered that. Also, the Federal Reserve announced that it has given approval for banks owned by the Chinese government to buy stakes in U.S.-owned banks. That's right. So it also said here a few days ago that Reuters reported that China is now able to completely bypass Wall Street and purchase U.S. debt directly from the U.S. Treasury Department. And after a bunch of money went from U.S. taxpayers to General Motors for being inefficient in that, it said they are currently involved in 11 joint ventures with companies owned by the Chinese government. The price for entering into many of these joint ventures was a transfer of state-of-the-art technology from GM to the Communist Chinese. And remember, just recently we covered what was that the armed services found counterfeit Chinese parts in the Department of Defense supply chain. And remember the computer chips that I was talking about that have a back door built in them. So, and that's talking about military weapons and stuff like that. So, and yeah, actually there was in Michigan, a Sino Michigan Properties Chinese company purchased 200 acres there near the town of Milan, Michigan. The goal is to build a China city with artificial lakes, Chinese culture center, and hundreds of housing units for Chinese citizens. And lastly, besides snapping up luxury apartments, they're also buying up restaurants in Ohio, but also in Ohio, the Toledo Edison power plant as well. And lastly, I'll finish up with this. You can go there and check out basically the rest of the evidence that the United States is being infiltrated and taken over, basically. I mean, it's already been taken over, and I'm not going to go through it all right now, but just on the surface, that's what we are... that's what we're experiencing right now. So, and, for those people that didn't get the memo, there you go. Also, lastly, we have this major road and bridge projects all over the United States are being built by Chinese companies. Meanwhile, there are millions upon millions of blue-collar American workers that cannot find jobs. So, and moving on to this, we have China condemns U.S. gun ownership as human rights violation. It says here, a report issued by the State Council, the People's Republic of China, included U.S. gun ownership among the list of human rights violations, as the United States taxpayers also fund abortions in that country, forced abortions, mind you. They drag women out of their homes and abort them and sterilize them and that. It says here, Law Enforcement Examiner reported yesterday the human rights record in the United States in 2011 was published last Friday. Yeah, so, talk about human rights and stuff. Let's not forget what we were just talking about, which is the brutal occupation and suppression of Tibetan sovereignty. So I'm not even going to go through that and waste our time. It says here, U.S., it's kind of like in Mexico where they're saying, oh, all the guns are coming in from the United States, and you guys have too many guns in their countries with citizens. You need to ban guns to end the war on drugs. But we know that if they ended the war on drugs, there wouldn't be drug cartels and stuff like that are taking over the government of Mexico, and that you wouldn't have all the violence along the border. Basically bodies that have been beheaded, thrown out on the highways on a normal basis. But what you will have is sting operations like Fast and Furious, where the U.S. government was putting and arming the drug cartels. So, and also shipping in drugs and getting caught. So. U.S. completes massive military exercise in Jordan. Remember we covered this before, Operation Eager Lion. So it's an eager lion. It was meant to reassure puppet dictators of U.S. support and to threaten Iran. They completed a massive military exercise that included 18 other nations and served as a provocative show of force in a very unstable region, which is what they're doing with Panetta and the Navy and all that in China and Taiwan right now, and then in South Asia and Australia. And God, I even remember, how could I forget, paratroopers, special forces in Korea. So, I mean, they're all over the place, right? So Michael Rubin, advisor to former Secretary Rumsfeld from 2002 to 2004, is now an analyst at the American Enterprise Institute, told the Christian Science Monitor that the exercise was meant to reassure America's puppet dictators that they have their back. Quote, in Washington, we convince ourselves we withdrew from Iraq per political agreements, but a lot of propaganda in the region, especially the Iranian-backed propaganda, suggests that we fled in defeat. One of the perceptions we're trying to reverse is the perception among many Gulf monarchs and the King of Jordan that we dumped Hosni Mubarak in Egypt way too quickly. And he said that it's been a goal since the 1980s to build a kind of military relationship with allied Middle Eastern dictatorships to check against Iran's military ambitions. And this is what I thought it was for, training operation for future intervention and occupation of Syria. But this individual from the Washington Institute for Near East Studies calls the timing of the exercise a happy coincidence. So, going to keep moving here. We have military intervention in Syria cannot be ruled out, says Francis Holland, So just just like Sarkozy, it's just one in, one goes out the door, the other comes in, and it's just business as usual, right? Nothing really changes. French unemployment rate hits 12-year high ahead of presidential runoff. So French unemployment rate hits 12-year high. So this is pretty crazy. There's 2.8 million people that are unemployed in France, and he's calling for let's go ahead and let's start bombing fucking Syria, right? That's his priority. Says Lebanese join the Free Syrian Army struggle. So, and remember all the propaganda that we heard, during Rumsfeld and Bush, and Paul Wolfowitz and all them about jihad. Osama bin Laden, Afghanistan, jihad. Well, today there is a need for jihad in Syria, a jihad for righteousness. So that's why it must be that the West is actually putting in puppet governments like in Egypt, like the Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda run groups in Libya that they took over, and then of course in Syria they're going to try to get the same thing as well. But for some reason we're supposed to be fighting against radical extremists, al-Qaeda and jihad. So we're funding the same enemy that we're supposed to be fighting. And I just wonder how the people over in Afghanistan that every couple of days you'll hear about a U.S. NATO soldier getting killed. Well, what the hell are they dying for if it's if we're supplying funding and fighting with our enemy, or fighting along with our enemy to fight the enemy, which is supposedly them. But don't worry, people don't want to hear that. There's Vietnam veterans that still, hey, I'm proud of my Vietnam service, damn proud, right? It's like, well, I'd be pissed off if I was a Vietnam vet, If I was a Middle Eastern vet, like was it Adam Kokesh, whatever, I'd be pretty damn pissed off, dude, to realize that it was really for nothing. I mean, just say it was for nothing, dude. You worked for the military-industrial complex. You were tricked, you were fooled, you were brainwashed, like myself. You got to get over that. Quit supporting that crap. Once you do that, you'll feel better, the weight will be off your shoulders, and then you can start speaking your mind. When you do, you're going to find out a lot of people are going to respect you for that. NATO behind Houla Massacre. The Office of United Nations High Commissioner says that most of the civilian victims of last week's massacre in a Syrian town were executed. He goes on to be quoted as saying, actually, this was a premeditated, pre-orchestrated component of the NATO foreign policy, actually, or what you can call it, is an alliance of the U.S. Israeli, Saudi Arabia. Remember, I covered that before. Sunni-backed with regard to this premeditated action and this murder, killing hundreds of people there. All right, so I'm going to speed it up here, guys. Western nations expel Syrian envoys. U.S. and ally response. New details emerged that civilians were massacred by the United Nations and NATO, and United Nations new press for sanctions expected. So remember, al-Qaeda was pictured alongside United Nations. So as long as UN is there, the violence will continue and escalate. But the UN is going to be calling for the end of violence. You see that? You see this is the mind games that they play on us, guys? They think that we're flipping stupid, that we don't see it. But unfortunately, the majority of people, like I was saying about the vets, they do. They're zombies. Talk about zombies eating people's faces. There's zombies all around you. West Houla Syrian narrative crumbles, expels Syrian diplomats. Anyway, so UN admits almost all of the people killed were killed at close range by militants, not Syrian soldiers firing artillery. So think of that. Remember that word, militants. Syria gives Dutch charge d'affaires 72 hours to leave. They expelled a Dutch affairs diplomat. War between Damascus and the other country. Armed groups attack oil pipeline in Syrian cities. So that's the jihadists attacking the pipelines in Syria. Militants, media propaganda to avoid counting civilian deaths. Obama redefined militants to mean all military-age people in airstrike, males. The revelations come from 36 of Obama's current and former advisors that was published in the New York Times. Go check that out. NATO's senior al-Qaeda leader killed in Afghanistan. It's the only ones you ever hear about, right? The leaders, right? So it justifies what? Afghan family getting killed by an airstrike. Where's their names? So instead of trying to fix the problem of soldiers posing with dead Taliban fighters and burning the Quran, they're just going to go ahead and restrict war zone photography. Also, they're going to bug the place, whole Afghanistan, with these little stones, spy stones, after they, quote, pull out. U.S. terror drone strikes breed sympathy for militants in Yemen, says a report. And as more militants in Yemen were killed recently, UN says after a single candidate vote, Yemen's democracy is largely on track. Don't forget the executive order by Obama blocking property of people that threaten the peace, security, and stability of Yemen.